Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we are continuing to read Debi Pearl's book, Preparing to be a Helpmeet, in which Debi tries to teach us how to prepare to be good, submissive, soulless little slaves. Wives. She's teaching us how to be good wives. That's it. Always get us two mixed up. I'm filming this after I have just filmed another video as well, so I've already been talking for a little bit. My voice may be getting a little bit crackly at this point. Sorry, it's very late at night, but here, enjoying a nice glass of wine. We spoke about in the last video. It's a Picpoul de Pinet. Very nice. Enjoying it a lot. This is going to be a pretty hefty video, I think. We have a lot of chapters to cover, a lot of ground to cover in this, so I'm going to be talking for a while. So if there are specific bits you're interested in, I will chop it up into chapters and leave timestamps down in the video description. So let's talk about what happened in the last video, because this is a part 2. You don't need to have seen the first part to enjoy this, but if you want to, I'll also leave that linked in the video description as well. In the last video, we covered the first chapter of this book, which was the story of how Debi was groomed by her husband Michael, and it was pretty horrific. It showed us lots and lots of relationship red flags that Debi was somehow trying to be like, oh, look how wonderful these are, yay! It was very, very messed up. In the second part, we're going to be covering a whole bunch of chapters, and we are going to learn how to find the right man for you, or rather, which man you're the right slave for. As always, this book is full of statements which shame women and blame them for everything. There's lots of double standards and just really potentially dangerous advice. In these few chapters, Debi introduces 3 types of men and how we can make each kind happy. She then throws in this short part about the 3 kinds of women and which ones certain men will want. But before then, we get a totally true story of some random people. Lydia and Billy, and how they met. Fun fact for you, I was nearly called Lydia instead of Rachel, but I'm glad I wasn't, and I'm also glad I don't have Lydia's life. That's your useless fact of the day right there. Debi really likes to include these stories in her books to be like, yeah, read about this inspirational couple, this could be you. But every story just sounds so horrible, and you actually come away appreciating your own life a hell of a lot more and being thankful that you don't live the lives of these people. So I guess at least we're getting something out of it. I won't spend too long on this part because, as always, if this is what works for them, then who am I to judge, really? I'm glad that they're happy. But that said, there are a few parts which I think are being portrayed as normal and aspirational for other people, which I don't think should be, and I would like to take a critical look at them and discuss them. So it's less of a criticism of their personal relationship and more of a criticism of the teachings they're trying to press onto other people, if that makes sense. So it opens with, God, the most laughable line. My name is Lydia. By the time I turned 23 years old, I was beginning to wonder if I would ever marry. Oh my god, I still remember what I was like at 23 and I was basically still a baby. You have like 3/4 of your life still left ahead of you. This really is not too old to be single. This really isn't a, oh my god, I'm 23, it's over. No. Oh my god, it's just perpetuating these harmful ideas that there's some inherent schedule we all have to stick to in our lives, and that could not be further from the truth. Everything happens at different times for different people. You're allowed to do things in a different order if that's what works for you. You might not get married until you're 40, 50, 60, 70, but that doesn't reduce the quality of that marriage when you get there. And similarly, you might never get married and that's okay. That might be what's right for you. There's no set standard you have to stick to. But also, this is our first little double standard of this section of the book, as we get to a section later about how men need to wait until it's the right time for them to get married, and how a lot of men don't really come into their own until they hit their late 20s or 30s, so they might want to wait to get married until then. So they're saying, men, yeah, mid-30s is a totally reasonable time to get married. But for women, they're like, start worrying if you're 23 and not married yet. That's too old. You're practically a spinster. It's disgusting. Seriously, forget all that. Do things in your own time. Do what's right for you. Figure it out for yourself. There's no one right way at all. And I say this as a perfectly happy 28-year-old single woman who has never been married. Anyway, this decrepit old spinster is sat in her rocking chair in her room, counting her grey hairs and looking at retirement homes when her dad comes in and says, a young man has asked for permission to court you. So once again, devaluing women in favour of their father's opinions. It disgusts me that the first person to go to when thinking about her life, her future and her body is not her, but her father. Gross. Why has this man approached another man before approaching her? Hate it. Typical misogyny. She says, I had hoped and waited for this moment, some wonderful fellow to love me and ask for my hand in marriage, but now it was happening. All I could feel was a strange disconnect. My dad asked if I could guess who it might be. She had no idea. She had absolutely no idea. It's ridiculous. I tried to guess and could have continued guessing all night, but I would never have guessed it to be Billy Hill. I'd met him on and off over the years in different groups, but never really had a conversation with him, which is always a healthy start to any relationship, right? I just love it when strangers ask for my father's permission to try and marry me one day. So she talks about her first impressions of him. She says, "He seemed aloof and stiff, and I was a little scared of him. Besides, I had always assumed I would at least know the guy I would marry," which seems like a fair assumption to me, but what do I know? I'm 28 and unmarried. I'm past my prime, remember? So they start emailing each other, and Lydia immediately starts playing games with him because clearly no one wants a strong woman who just directly asks for what they want. Who would want that? Patience is an act of the will. Or at least acting patient is. So I made up my mind that I would not initiate any form of contact. If he emailed me, then I would email him in return. I really wanted just to meet Billy before I left to go to another camp, but I decided that unless he mentioned us meeting, I would not say a word. It was really hard waiting and wondering, but I had spent 23 years practicing patience for this moment in my life. Now was not the time to goof up. This just does not seem healthy to me at all. Direct communication is so important in relationships. If you want or need something from your partner, ask for it. If you want to spend time with them, ask for it. There's no point in playing these stupid games. Ridiculous. But apparently this all works out for them because eventually he does ask her to meet up. And it has a happy ending because at the end of their first meeting she says, "The day ended and I knew that at least I could stand him." Progress. God, the romance is a little heavy here. It's quite saccharine. I do feel a little bit sick. If this was written in the 90s, Hugh Grant would definitely be playing the part of Billy because, you know, this is pure mush right here. I can't even do that joke. It's sad. It's not funny, it's just sad. Anyway, she tolerates him so much that within a month they are engaged because she tells him, "I don't love you, hardly even know you. But I feel God is in this, so I'm willing to learn how to love you if you will teach me." Again, I think that was a line in a Hugh Grant film. And 3 months later they're married, and now she says she's completely in love with him, so I guess that's at least something, and good for them. I'm happy it worked out for them. What's interesting to me is what follows this story. We finally get some of the notes that are written by random men that Debbie knows. Because as we spoke about in the last video, we all know a woman cannot be trusted to write a book for women alone. She needs the input of men to come in and mansplain what being a woman is to us, obviously. One of the guys, he leaves this note on this story that reminds the female readers of this book that guys look for girls with a cheerful countenance, responsiveness, and who find a quiet joy in what they're doing or saying. And I find this so interesting that I keep coming across the same thing in these books. The men in these books always say that they want a woman with cheerful countenance. They want a woman who appears happy. They want someone who looks and speaks pleasantly. It's always about outward appearance. There's very little about the woman actually being happy or content or passionate about something. It's always just about appearing that way on the outside, putting on a happy face in front of the men. It's very odd. It's like these men always ask women to cover up their true emotions and always appear happy even when they're not. Sometimes they're really explicit about it, sometimes it's more subtle. But like this comes up again in the next chapter when we're warned that prophet or visionary men need a lady who does not take offense easily. She needs to be tough. He needs his lady to be full of life and joy. His lady will need to learn to tuck in that quivering lip, square those shoulders, and put on a smile. So once again, as women are being told that the way to keep a man happy is to never show emotion, to always plaster on a happy face all the time. It's patronizing, and honestly I think it's quite harmful. It kind of reminds me of the game We Happy Few, you know, where they're living in this horrible, decaying, decrepit world, I can't even say it.
Decrepit.
World, and all these people, I mean, they do it via a drug, but they have to plaster on these happy fake faces and make everything seem perfect and wonderful, and really it's not. And they're just using these big smiles to hide the truth. That's the vibe I get from this. And I mean, if you can't freely express your emotions to your partner, then who can you express them to? This whole thing is just really, really unhealthy. These guys go on to say that, yes, it's good for a young unmarried girl who's out of school to be involved in ministry, which I do think is actually completely reasonable. It's good to spend your time on hobbies and interests and passions, and for some people this will involve getting involved in your religion. Absolutely fine, that's awesome. Nothing wrong with that. It's always really important to encourage women, or anyone really, men, non-binary people, anyone, to spend their time on rewarding pursuits and not just sit around and wait for a partner. I think that is a really good thing to push, and it's one of the few good points in this book, but then they ruin it. She should be investing her time in worthy activities with long-term rewards and not spending too much time just hanging out with friends, short-term rewards. Yes, because how dare a woman have friends? Working on friendships will absolutely have long-term benefits to your life too. But of course, some men don't want to encourage that, because a woman with a strong network of friends behind her won't be as easy to control and manipulate and won't be as reliant on him. It's a tactic abusers use all the time. Separate a woman from her family and friends, isolate her, and she's far easier to control. Billy writes a little section about what attracted him to Lydia in the first place, and one of his big things is, I noted she wasn't a flirt. I always disregard any girl I ever saw flirting or hanging onto a guy's arm. Grabbers, beware. And then one of the other guys chimes in with, I agree, flirting cheapens a girl. Once again, commodifying women. Lovely. I cannot deal with this level of misogyny at all. This is ridiculous. Any man who doesn't value you because you flirted with him or expressed your interest directly in him is not worth your time. Straight up. Billy goes on to describe how he didn't figure out he wanted to date Lydia by talking to her or getting to know her. No, he was far too nervous for that. Instead, he asked around about her, which is hilarious considering all the warnings this book goes on to give women about talking about people and how awful that is. Again, double standard. They're like, women don't talk about people. Men, fine, ask around about whatever girls you want. Chat to your heart's content. And basically, he stalks her online. It's very bizarre and a little creepy. I searched the internet to find anything she might have written to anyone. I found her blog and read all her posts. If I'd read flirty nonsense or noted anything that lacked chastity in her manner, or seen pictures that alerted me to anything off-colour, I would have dismissed her. I emailed my sister, who was a friend to Lydia, and asked some questions. Was Lydia a hard worker? Did she have a good head on her shoulders? Was she flexible? Also, I needed to make sure she wasn't legalistic. I asked about her stand on music, dress, and movies, which are things that I knew would affect my future children. I spent some time thinking about all that I have read that she had written and what my sister said about her. It was all good. She was the kind of woman I had always wanted. Plus, I was highly attracted to her. I mean, these are all important things to consider in a life partner, but usually you find them out by getting to know the person one-on-one, talking to them, asking them to tell you these things, like sharing part of yourself with them in return. It's a two-way thing. This is just stalker behaviour. Anyway, Debbie then goes on to provide a summary of all the great things that Lydia did in this story, and most of them are focused on praising her lack of autonomy. For example, she didn't chase Billy down. She didn't say no when her dad surprised her with an offer from someone that she barely knew. Meanwhile, Billy, the man, actually gets some sensible pointers, like he waited until he knew he was in a place in his life where he could support and care for a wife before he started seriously looking. Now, I don't believe a man should support a woman in this sense, because here it means he's controlling her financially and just kind of controlling her. But I do think in general, the premise here of make sure you're in a good place yourself before trying and seriously dating someone else is really good advice, and I do support that. That seems like good advice for everyone. Again, no matter if you're man, woman, or non-binary, that's pretty solid. It's just odd here that there's a difference in the advice given to men and women in this book. Again, it's another weird double standard. And that's the end of this chapter. Now we're going to go on to talk about Debbie's 3 types of men, but quickly before we do that, I just want to take a little moment for a little bit of self-promotion, because I always forget to do this stuff. If you guys didn't know, one of my favourite things to do in the world, or some of my favourite things to do in the world, are taking photos and painting and writing, and I have collated some of my favourite things that I have created in the last decade over on my website for you guys to go and see and consume, all for free if you want. There's a whole portfolio of photos and paintings and poetry that you can go and read and stuff like that. And on there I also have a little web store where you can grab some prints of some of my favourite bits if you want. You can also get handmade limited edition liner prints, and also some hand-typed poetry where each one is finished with a completely unique little sketch and signed by me. So there's some really nice, like, unique pieces over there. It's a big mix of stuff, and it's just a little bit of a passion project for me, and it's just something that I really enjoy doing and that kind of means a lot to me personally. There's absolutely no pressure. You can just go and like browse the regular stuff if you want. You don't even need to go near the store. But if you do see anything you like, it just helps support me and my work, and it helps with the important stuff like paying the rent, and also means that I can invest back more into my channel and spend time creating more and more content for you guys. So I always really appreciate it, and thank you. If you're not into any of that stuff, you can also support my work over on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you get access to things like video notes and scripts, extra photos I've taken, and a Discord server where you can chat with other fans, and it's just a nice little community over there. Quite quiet, nice, chilled out, relaxed, no drama, it's lovely. And for the higher tiers, you can also get access to exclusive stickers and prints that are sent out to you every 3 months. So that's really cool. I don't know if I've ever explicitly like promoted this since I updated my Patreon, so I figured I probably should. It's quite cool. I like the rewards. I think they're good. I hope you guys do too. Sorry, I'm so bad. I hate promoting myself. Anyway, that's about it. Yes, okay, I'm done. Thank you for that little intermission. I'm sorry it was rambly and I'm bad at this, but back to the book. Thank you. So now we get on to Debi's 3 types of men, and she's spoken a little bit about this before in previous books, but I can't remember if I've covered it in any videos before. So here we go. The 3 types of men are the prophet, the priest, and the king. Each one of these get their own chapter in this book about who they are and how to attract them. And she also introduces the concept of 3 types of women, but they're all stuffed into one chapter, kind of like an end note, because obviously women aren't as important. For men, she says, God is 3 persons. When you think of God, do you think of God the Father? Or does Jesus come to your mind? Or maybe the Holy Spirit? The Bible relates that the one God is manifested in 3 persons. It is impossible for us to understand, but God has introduced himself to us as Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Your husband-to-be will fall into one of these 3 categories. He will be like God the Father, a king, or what I have dubbed a command man. He will be healing and kind like Jesus, a priest, or what I have called the steady man. He will be the image of the Holy Spirit, a prophet type, or a man of ideas. I call this type of man a visionary. And she later goes on to say how there are 3 types of women because they complement men. So once again, it's this ridiculous narrative of like men are like gods and women are just made to serve them. And it's gross. I really, really hate this idea of putting people into narrow categories in this way as well. To her credit, because credit where it's due, Debi does concede that some people may be a mix of 2 of these categories, but never 3. At least not in Debi's experience. But this whole thing is just a bit for me. Like, it's the same with things like the Myers-Briggs test and stuff like that, and like also astrology, or just there are huge pitfalls to putting people into distinct categories in this way. You're often placed into categories based on people seeing themselves in Barnum statements, which appeal to a lot of people anyway, and they rarely take into account the fact that people have different personality traits which are more or less dominant on different days or at different times in their life. It's a bit too deterministic for my taste, and there's a whole bunch of other issues with things like personality tests or categorizing people like this that I don't have time to go into right now, but that are issues. But regardless, let's take a look at Debi's 3 kinds of men. God. And actually, to any men watching, just for a giggle, let me know which of these 3 you think you are down in the comments. Or you could be a mix of 2, I guess, but there's always a dominant one, according to Debi. So for our first type of man, the prophet man, Debi reminds women that in order to attract or keep these men, you must be flexible for your man. She also warns that, a caution, your most important job as a prophet's wife is keeping a chaste and common sense attitude and conversation, not bad-mouthing folks. Without it, your marriage will be miserable. And with this in mind, she goes on to talk about who this prophet man is. So apparently they are striving to change the way things are done or change how humanity is behaving or thinking. Prophet-type men are street preachers, political activists, organisers, and instigators of any frontline social issue. They love confrontation and hate the status quo. Good-hearted prophets can be a lot of fun. They are never Mr. Dull. They can love with a passion and be aggressively loyal to their friends and family. They can take the lead in calling the world to repentance and showing them the path to righteousness. God, why does this literally read like some astrology thing in a teen magazine? But so far, not too bad, I guess. Until you will hear them going on and on about issues like whether or not we should celebrate Christmas. Should we accept a license from the state? Should a Christian opt out of the social security system? Why go to a doctor? No birth control. They may be extreme in their separation from the world. The issues they focus on may be serious and worthy of one's commitment, but in varying degrees. These men can have tunnel vision, tenaciously focusing on single issues. They can drive some women crazy. So what you're saying is they're opinionated and loud and will shove it down your throat. The thing is, like, these people who are super passionate and thought leaders can be wonderful people, and I love having conversations with people like that. It's just, Debi doesn't write about them in the most flattering way. She makes them sound like they're all stubborn and loud, amongst other negative traits, which we'll get into in a moment. So she goes on to say that these men might be romantic at first, but a few weeks after marriage, though, his focus will turn to other challenges. As his new bride, you will feel abandoned. It's important for all girls to understand this great truth regardless of what type you marry. You need a life, a vibrant life before your man comes on the scene. A clingy, useless wife that lacks drive, goals, ambitions or dreams is just that, useless. Which on the one hand I think offers some great advice at the end there, but also being told that sometimes you'll feel abandoned or lonely or neglected and you just have to suck it up, bitch. It just feels really cruel and unhelpful. And it's just excusing potentially abusive behaviour. Like, she literally says, don't be offended when he focuses on something other than you, which is fair. It's his nature. He cannot do otherwise. Of course, as a wife, you will still need to be ready to ooh and ah when he comes back to share his new vision with you. When he does turn his attention back to you, all the other wives will be jealous, for you will have the most romantic man around. Seriously. I am never going to be the kind of person that says couples should be dependent on each other or that you owe each other attention all the time, but this just feels like it's too far in the opposite direction. This feels like Debi is literally saying, it'll all be on the man's terms, deal with it with a smile on your face or else. And then she goes back to talking about how reckless these men often are and literally says, good intentions don't always keep prophet types from causing great harm. If they're not wise, they can stir up pudding and end up with toxic waste. Often the difference between a productive prophet and a destructive prophet is a good, supportive, stable woman. An unwise wife with negative words can turn a prophet into an antichrist, an inventor into a destroyer. Every prophet... Why did I sound like the man for the double glazing adverts? Do you remember those, like... This is like... We're talking like late 90s now. They go,
you know the one. You buy one, you get one.
I sounded like him with that. I'm so sorry. If you're not in the UK, that is going to have sounded very, very odd. Anyway. Let me paraphrase this so I don't giggle. Every prophet needs a good, wise, prudent, stable wife who has a positive outlook on life. So on a more serious note, basically what Debi is saying is, if these men mess up, it's your fault. Women face the blame for everything with Debi. A man messes up, it's the wife's fault. A woman messes up, it's her fault. Kids mess up, it's the woman's fault. Do you know what I mean? It's ridiculous. Pure internalized misogyny. And then there's this whole thing about how if you choose to marry one of these men, chances are all the people in your life will tell you he's toxic and you should just ignore them because that totally sounds healthy and not terrifying at all. I'm going to be honest, if all the women in your life are saying to you, this man has red flags, get out of there, it generally helps to listen to them. Just saying, from experience. Once you get it into your head that your husband does not have to be right for you to follow him, you will finally be able to say bye-bye to your overwrought parents, even when they're screaming that you are married to a crazy man. People looking on will marvel that you're able to love and appreciate your husband, but you will know better because you see his greatness. This sounds toxic and abusive as hell. Prophet/visionary men will not notice what he eats, so don't be offended when he doesn't seem to appreciate your fine cooking. What he does appreciate is your interest in his present project. Not your opinion or even your input, just the light in your eyes as you listen to him tell his newest wild idea. So he wants a fan, not an equal, not a partner. Be prepared to only ever be a cheerleader and never think things through for yourself. You must support even his worst ideas. This is so damaging. Never have any inputs or ideas of your own. No. As a woman, it's not valid. But then I guess she does say don't be too much of a cheerleader. And she does say you should guide him away from bad ideas, but never directly. you're never just supposed to tell him directly what you're feeling. She says, let him burn out on things that are not wise, but don't throw water on his fire. Let him find his own balance through bumping into hard realities. It's just all, it feels really manipulative and messy and toxic, and it just reminds me a lot of like back when I was with Johnny and he was being reckless or destructive, or sometimes he would do illegal things that I was never okay with, but I was constantly walking on eggshells around him, because if I told him I wasn't okay with it in the wrong way, then like I would be in trouble. So like if I straight up said to him, don't do this, it's illegal and dangerous because reasons. So for example, when I would get really mad at him for, he would do a lot of cocaine and then drive, or drink a lot of alcohol and drive. And I would be like, you cannot do this, don't do this. But like it was always when I wasn't with him. But I would literally be like, I will send you money for a taxi to get home, don't drive. And then he would do it anyway, and when he got home he would just like scream and shout and punish me and throw things at me and smash things up. And it was really hard because like when I said something I was punished for it, but if I didn't say something then innocent people would suffer. So you have to try and express your concerns without putting yourself in danger. And that's really, really hard to do. It's impossible to do. And it's exhausting and it's a terrifying way to live. And I'm so glad I'm out of it. It just absolutely should not be glorified or joked about or excused. No. There's also a warning to be careful what you say around this kind of man in case you make him angry. So she says, a woman's idle, negative conversation can cripple a strong man and cause him to become an angry, confrontational, divisive man. And again, somehow this is spun to make the woman into the bad guy, not the angry, reactive man. It's the woman that's bad for making him angry. Again, this is what like Johnny used to say all the time. I was always at fault for making him angry. It's always my fault. This whole thing just screams to me like, and we spoke about this in the last video when we were talking about the first part of the book. It feels like Debi is sunk so far into this relationship that she has with her husband, which I would say is arguably almost definitely abusive. It feels that she's sunk so far into that relationship and this lifestyle that she's just completely in denial about any problems and is just constantly trying to spin them as good things. And it's really, really sad to see and really difficult to read about, because like for myself, as someone who grew up in not a great household, like my dad and often my brother would just fly off the handle at anything and everything, and it was the same with Johnny. And I can tell you this for a fact, that this kind of behaviour is not okay, and it's never the victim's fault. Like when I was a kid, the slightest thing would set Dad off and he would shout and throw things around a lot and it was scary. But I think Warren was scarier because like you say the wrong thing to him and he would hit me, and often it would come out of nowhere and it was terrifying. And I'd end up with like, he'd hit me so hard I'd have literal like handprints on my arms or my legs, or he'd hit me around the head so hard it was like throbbing for hours. And like this wasn't just like a sibling hitting sibling kind of thing. This wasn't like kids fighting. He was 10 years older than me, so I was like a tiny 4, 5, 6, 7-year-old child, and he was a grown man. I spent most of my childhood like walking on eggshells around angry men, and I spent a long time after that having to teach myself how to actually speak up for myself again when I needed to. And part of that involved creating like little safe spaces full of really good people who did let me share my views on things, but it messed me up and it was not a happy way to grow up. And it was the same with Johnny. I think I stayed with him so long because I just kind of understood that that was the way men behave. And it's taken me a long time to snap out of that mindset. And it's still hard to, I don't know, I'm still learning and everything. But what I can say for certain, and this is something I'm still trying to convince myself of, but logically I know it's right, that kind of life is not something you should ever put up with. It is not normal, and it is not something you should just have to accept. You should not spend your life walking on eggshells around anyone. You should never fear anger or violence for just having a casual conversation with someone or expressing your opinion. That's not an okay way to live, and you can and should leave, and there's nothing wrong with doing that. And then to go back to the book, of course she ends this segment with basically saying just let him spend recklessly like a child to avoid any argument. So she writes, a profit-natured man with his tunnel vision might spend money unwisely, leaving his wife feeling insecure. To stay happy with this man, you must remember that your treasure is not of this world. Treasure your husband and children, and don't mourn the loss of monetary things, which is even more ridiculous when you see the double standard, when later she writes, all men dislike for their wives to waste time or money. So again, it's okay for a man to do it, but never a woman. The next chapter is about the priest kind of man, and Debbie writes that the wife of a priest type needs to be as active helping others as her husband is. This will bring him honour. And for these guys, Debbie warns not to be impatient or unthankful, as this can destroy his vision for serving others, which honestly isn't as bad as some of the things she's written, so I'll give this one a pass. This one seems pretty basic at first, so she says stuff like, you may marry a man that is priestly in nature, he will be the most steady and easygoing of the three types, not given to extremes. As a general rule, he will be faithful till the day he dies in the same bed he has slept in for the last 40 or 50 years. Really hope he bought a new mattress in that time, that sounds pretty unhealthy and disgusting. This man is content with the wife of his youth, so seems pretty normal too. If you marry one of these steady, priest-natured men, your new husband will never put undue pressure on you to perform miracles. That's nice. He will not expect you to be his servant like a king type would. You will not have to spend your days putting out emotional fires like you would if you married a prophet type. You will rarely feel hurried, pushed, pressured or forced, which, let's be completely honest, sounds pretty nice and fairly stable compared to a lot of the kinds of men that Debbie writes about and describes, so no complaints from me so far. However, there are plenty of complaints from Debbie herself. She says that the downside of a priestly-natured man is the irritation his very steadiness produces in an impatient romantic woman needing a little reckless adventure to spice up her life. This type of man is steady and cautious, and for a spoiled young girl it is hard to see his worth and readily honour him. He almost seems old when he is young. He seems to just let people use him. It's like she's really got it into her head that instability and cruelty and being irresponsible are synonymous with passion and love, and without it there's no passion and it's dull and it's worthless. And that just isn't true. You can have passion and sparks and romance with a stable, emotionally mature and responsible man too. A man can be stable and passionate at the same time. They're not mutually exclusive. I just feel like she's trying to make herself feel better, like, oh, these men treat their wives well. Oh, well, they must be boring. Oh, well, my husband treats me badly. Oh, he's just passionate and loves me more than anyone else. She feels like she's making excuses, and it's really sad. Like, this is the first mature, stable kind of man that she's written about, and she's trying to spin these positive traits as though they're negative, which is odd. Very, very odd. She tells us a good wife will make herself conform to his gifts. She will use her time to make her home a pleasant place to gather. She will learn to cook for groups and become a gracious hostess. Her strength and ministry will be hospitality. This will bring him honour. So again, it's all about only doing stuff when it makes the man happy. And once again, if you dare to do anything that isn't perfect for him, then you are completely at fault, because she says, an impatient wife often finds it difficult to quietly wait for him to make up his mind. In her agitation, she leaks criticisms which tear at his confidence and make him even more cautious and non-committal. He just wants peace and to be left alone, to do his daily routine and enjoy the company of people who are not all fired up, passionate or critical. Are you controlling? What can you do to change your attitudes so that you are not guilty of trying to revamp what God designed? So it's awful for these men when a woman is fired up, passionate or critical, but women just have to accept it and deal with it when a man's that way. This is just another of Debbie's double standards, which is like the word of the day for this video. Just know how when she talks about a man's negative traits, it's all like, if you don't put up with this, then you as a woman won't be right for him. You as a woman need to accept these bad things about him, or you aren't good enough for him. But when it's the other way around, when it's a woman with negative traits, she's all like, if you keep doing this, then men won't want you. You need to change or you won't be good enough for this man. It's ridiculous. She completely forgets and overlooks the fact that figuring out about compatibility goes both ways, and sometimes both people have to compromise a bit, or both people are allowed to have preferences and deal breakers and so on. She is absolutely ridiculous. If she ever managed to get her head around things like same-sex relationships, or the fact that non-binary people exist, then God, I wonder what she'd say about like two men getting together and how that would work in her eyes. It'd be quite funny. Hello, Angel. You say hi. Little Kyra break. Hi. I love you. Isn't she the cutest girl in the world? Oh, sleepyhead. I know. And speaking of double standards, she goes on to confirm all of this by saying, you must be humble enough to bend and merge into the new identity. You will not waste your marriage trying to change your husband into what you think he should be. So don't try and change your husband. Change for him. No, really, change a lot. If you get such a man, you need to learn how to stand still and listen. Seek to always have a gentle spirit. Look up shamefacedness in the Bible and learn what it means. This study will mold you into what you need to become. And of course, she reminds us to never do anything for yourself or your own enjoyment, because your fun is not important at all, apparently. She says that you need to start today to learn to do this and this and this and this and this, because your skills and achievements will be your husband's resume. When those on the outside take note of your wisdom and confidence, it will reflect well upon your husband. And finally, on to Debi's final kind of man, the king, who she says her husband is, or rather who he probably likes to think he is, and is making her write this because he has an ego bigger than our entire solar system. She says that the wife to a king must learn to serve him with honour, and warns, don't be offended at his lack of serving or helping you in the mundane things of life. She says if you should marry a king, you must be prepared to give him honour and reverence on a daily basis if you want him to be a benevolent, honest, strong and fulfilled man of God. Every king wants a queen. And every me wants a glass of wine. Tell me your husband has an overinflated ego and delusions of grandeur without telling me your husband has an overinflated ego and delusions of grandeur. These types are known for expecting their wives to wait on them hand and foot. A kingly man doesn't want his wife involved in any project that prevents her from serving him. If you are blessed to win the favour of a strong, forceful, bossy man, then it is very important for you to learn how to serve him with joy. Keep using these words like blessed all you like, Debbie, but you will never convince me that any of this is a good thing or that you're actually happy with any of this. And you'll absolutely never convince me that your husband or any of these men have any respect for women. It only gets worse too. This bit sounds absolutely horrific. A woman married to a kingly man has to earn her place in his heart by proving that she will stand by her man, faithful, loyal, and obedient. Kind of like a dog, but these women don't have a choice. She is on call every minute of her day. Her man wants to know where she is, what she is doing, and why she is doing it. He corrects her without thought. For better or worse, it is his nature to control. This is so toxic and abusive and honestly scary. Stop glorifying this kind of behaviour. It's not okay and it's not normal. Oh, look, and more blaming women for any faults in the man. Again, a king who has gone bad is likely to be abusive, selfish, and overbearing. Sounds like most of them are, to be honest. It is important to remember that much of how a kingly man reacts depends on his wife's reverence towards him. When a kingly man, lost or saved, is treated with honour and reverence, a good helpmeet will find that her man will be wonderfully protective and supportive. In most marriages, the strife is not because the man is cruel or evil, it is because he expects obedience, honour, and reverence and is not getting it. This is typical victim blaming and it is disgusting. Honestly, the more I read from Debi about her relationship and the type of man her husband Michael is, the more I feel sorry for her and want to help her. But then I also remember that the parenting guide she co-wrote with Michael was linked to the deaths of a number of children, and that she herself uses a range of branches and ceramic pipes to beat children as young as 6 months old, and before that you just pull their hair. And any sympathy I have or had for her just goes out the window. She's clearly the product of abuse, but she's also perpetuating abuse of others. And for that reason, it's like, I understand where she's coming from, I understand why she has these views, but that still doesn't make it okay. If you want to find out more about this, then please go check out the video reviews I did on the Pearl's book, To Train Up a Child. There's 2 videos and they're horrific. But actually, side note, this is a thing that I say a lot sometimes. Sometimes when I cover like controversial people and views and topics and stuff, I'll say something like, oh yeah, I understand why they think this way. And sometimes people get mad at me for that because they're like, oh, how can you understand it? I'm like, I understand it. That doesn't mean I agree with it or accept it or won't be critical of it. I can disagree fundamentally with someone's views and still understand why they hold them. There's definitely a difference there, and I just kind of want to make that clear. So I understand why Debi behaves in many of the ways she does. I understand why she holds a lot of the views that she has, but that still doesn't make it okay. And finally, Debi ends this part of the book, and this is the last bit we're going to be covering in this video, by talking about the 3 kinds of women who were created for these men. So they're all kind of rushed through in one chapter though, because women aren't as important as men. clearly. She writes, a female's type is not as predominant as a man's. Remember, man was created in God's image and we in man's image, so we are one step removed from the original, which thankfully tempers our extremes. So in Debi's view, there are apparently dreamer gals who are similar to prophets, servant girls who are similar to priests, and go-to gals who are similar to kings. And now it might be a good time to mention that I hate the word gal and wish it would die and burn in a fire. Debi also talks about how she doesn't think similar types of people should be together, which is just, yeah, whatever. Good point, I guess. I suppose. I guess it makes sense that you should want to be with someone who complements you and who you don't, for example, share too many of the same flaws with. I think it's good when couples kind of push each other and improve each other and kind of take up the slack for the other when one's lacking a little bit. I guess that makes sense. And I just don't like how she tends to frame this all in the context of be with the kind of man who you can be most useful for, but never the other way around. That's a bit gross. She also warns that each of these kinds of women have flaws too, but remember how where she listed the men's flaws, it was always like, but these are actually good and you just need to change and adapt to them and accept them. Women don't get that. We're just straight up told to change. For example, if you're a dreamer, then you need to keep your head out of the clouds while dancing your way into your vision of the future. Don't get involved in projects that take you away from your responsibility to honour your husband. So once again, it's all very man-focused. Even the compliments are centred around men. Men are not intimidated by a female with a kind servant's heart. It is so feminine, very different from males. This type definitely has its perks. I just find these descriptions gross. Especially if she follows it up by talking about how we're super weak. So she says, a man has a natural need to protect, defend and cherish, therefore he is drawn towards a weaker vessel. A woman's need to be cared for causes her to be drawn to a man who makes her feel secure. These natural needs help us find life mates that best fit our abilities and desires, but power struggles still arise, especially when a girl has not been taught what God says concerning honouring her husband. I would criticise this, but Debi's way ahead of me. Some of you who have strong gifts might ask, well, what about my God-given gifts and drives? Are women just supposed to lay down their abilities and let the man do his thing, even when she may be more gifted and capable than he is? Yes, that's exactly the way it is. And no, not at all. The key is to recognise your natural type, not so you can take the lead, but so you can understand how it might weaken or aid your service to your first in command, your husband. I'm literally at a loss for words at this point. And of course she ends this chapter by coming back to the central theme of this book, which is, of course, woman was created to be a helper who was suited to meet the man's needs, to fill in between the lines. I was created to help him be successful, to bear his children, and train them according to his will. God gave man the kind of nature that would be suitable to hold the superior office in the chain of command. A wife's position under her husband is where God put her for her own spiritual, emotional, and physical safety. It is the only position where a wife will find real fulfillment as a woman. Excuse me while I just go gag a little bit. God is not impressed by our gifts, our types, or our strengths. He is impressed by our willingness to abide by and appreciate his program by conforming to the needs of our man. God calls married women helpmeets. He never called a man to be a helpmeet to his wife. This is not a two-way street. God commanded us, wives, to submit to, obey, and even reverence our husbands. This whole thing is a concept that I've criticised heavily over the years and in various videos, so I won't repeat myself again. Instead, I'll just leave you with one more laughable passage from the book, in which Debi shows us how shallow she thinks men are, and completely misrepresents a large number of women. Females are not necessarily attracted to good looks, whereas most men put good looks as the number one qualification for any female they are considering. I know, it's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Also, oh god, I'm so stressed. My camera battery's about to die. I lost my spare when I was down in London the other week, so I'm working with one at the minute, and it's a bit of a nightmare. And I just tried re-recording this, and the microphone was off, and everything's a nightmare. And I've had like a 10-minute break, between saying the last sentence and reading that last book quote, and I'm a little bit out of it now, because battery died and I had to go charge it for 10 minutes. So before anything else goes wrong, thank you for watching today. Leave a like and a comment for engagement, because I really appreciate it. Let me know what you thought of this video in the comments below. I'm running out of time, I don't know what to do. Thank you for watching, I appreciate you, and I'll see you again soon. Bye. Oh god. I have new batteries arriving soon, they cannot come quickly enough.